Started. Let the record show that all the directors except Walt Chesky are present. And okay, there's Jim. Hello, Jim.
Hello.
Anybody here from our attorney, or we're just going to get started here?
I haven't heard from him this morning.
There he is. He's joining now.
Hello, this is Brian.
Hi, Brian. How are you?
Good morning.
We just convened the meeting and made note that all of the directors except Walt Chesky are present, and Walt will not be able to join us today. So,
okay.
So anything you want to start off with, Brian, to make this?
This is Brian. If y'all want, I can go through briefly the meeting procedures and then can handle the roll call for the staff and consultants and members of the public.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, this is Brian Yates with SPH. As we noted, we have taken the roll call for our board of directors for the Woodlands Mud number 1. As in prior meetings, I'll briefly go through the meeting procedures and then we'll complete the roll call. So first, need to remind everyone the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Next, please remember to state your name before you speak, including the making of any motions. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Third, we'll continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting remotely so that we can accurately reflect the attendance in the minutes of the meeting. We will perform the roll call for consultants and staff and then members of the public. But starting with our Woodlands Water staff, Jim Stinson.
Present.
Mike Mooney.
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois.
Present.
Jeannie Scott.
Present.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy.
I'm here.
Any other representatives from Woodlands Water? If not, we'll move on to Sanderson River Authority. Ron Kelly.
Present.
Chris Meeks.
Present.
Matt Corley.
Present.
Ed Shackelford.
Present.
Any other members of the River Authority in the meeting? Okay, we'll move on to Mud 1 consultants. Do we have any Mud 1 consultants in the meeting? If not, we'll move on to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public present in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record as well. Okay, that will complete the roll call. Bob, I'll hand it back over to you to begin the agenda. Thank you.
Hey, Brian, this is Dan Chopart. I apologize. I'm a member of the public. I'm with HHC. I'm just stopping in to listen to the board meeting today.
Well, Dan, welcome aboard.
You bet. Nice to see you guys again.
Okay, well, do we have any comments from the public? Dan, do you want to say something?
No, I don't have anything to add to the meeting today. I just want to say hi to you guys and say how much we appreciate all the work you guys are doing for the community.
Okay, thanks.
If you have any developer questions, I'll try to answer those. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, update on Falling Star Court. Mike,
this is Mike. Yeah, the ball is still in Mr. and Mrs. Billings' court. We have not heard anything back from them. They're still dealing with their lender.
Okay, well, I'm not too many years from now, Mike, I'll be 100 years old. So I
Hope it happens before then.
yeah, I hope we hear from that. Do we have any requests for relief? Mike or Jeannie?
This is Mike. Nothing from me this month.
This is Jeannie. I don't have anything either.
Okay, thank you. we need to move ahead to the consent agenda, and I would like to move the San Jacinto Division report out of the consent agenda. And Shelley, I would like to do that on a permanent basis, not just today, but permanently. So if there are no objections on the remaining items in the consent agenda, I'll entertain a motion to, well,
Bob,
we can just, I keep forgetting that, so.
Bob, this is Jeff. I move for approval of the remaining items of the consent calendar.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Yes.
I'll say aye.
Aye.
Okay, a motion passes. I do have a question on the financial agenda. I noticed that water revenues are up by 11%, but the sewer revenues are down by 15%. Is there any kind of an explanation for that, Jeannie or Maureen?
For the March bills, people have started to use their sprinkler systems, but they're still using the same sewer average.
Okay.
So water could be higher than budgeted.
Yeah, I guess I contributed to that. Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
All right. Let's do the San Jacinto report. Ron or Ed, are you going to take that?
This is Matt Corley. Be happy to answer any questions you might have. Is there anything particular with the report?
Yeah, I don't have any questions so much about the report, but in the in our packet, there's quite a criticism by Senator Metcalf, and you know I'm a little disturbed by that. And does anybody from SJRA have comments on that?
Oh boy, in public, probably not. We know that he's filed a couple of bills that would greatly impact not only our board, but the one would be most impactful that the Woodlands would be concerned about is the one about the not being able to issue any revenue bonds unless it was by vote of the people. That would be a very significant impact, as y'all know, to the Woodlands, as we have hundreds of millions of dollars in your 10-year project plan, and then hundreds of millions of dollars after your project plan. If we would be required to issue bonds, that would be impactful.
Hey, Ron, this is Jeff. It seemed like it would be very impactful. There's discussions about obviously expanding or changing the wastewater treatment systems at a pretty huge number. Do you think this was an effort to maybe forestall that or kill it or what?
No, I don't think it's anything at that granular level. I think this is just a way of, by some people who have proposed it to Representative Metcalf to impact the River Authority in what we do.
Yeah, this is Brian. I think on that bill also, it seems like the focus may be more related to the countywide GRP conversion and the revenue debt issued for the surface water plant. The bill's not drafted that way, but it seems like that may be part of what was spurring it. But yeah, I'll cover a little more under the attorney's report. But at this point, that bill doesn't seem to be getting much traction. And most notably, it doesn't have a Senate companion bill. Bills that are really teed up for passage generally have identical bills introduced in both chambers, in the House and the Senate. These SGRA related bills do not.
Right, you're right. It's more. It was created to address GRP, but it is more, like as you said, it's more wide ranging than that.
Well, I'm upset by some of his comments, like outrageous water bills. And he believes in holding the government accountable to we the people, and changing the Lone Star board was a great step in the right direction. Well, all of us know that the board, every member of the Lone Star board was elected with the support of Quadvest. And we all know, and the subject will come up later, that the subject of DFCs has become a major contentious issue. So I don't know whether I agree with many of the things in his statement, but that's my opinion. So, okay, I got that off. It upsets me. Let's move to the regular agenda. Status of DFC development process by GMA 14. I was not able to attend that meeting, but I understand it was quite contentious. Ron, did you attend that meeting?
Yes, sir. Wouldn't miss it. Wouldn't miss it. You hear some feedback. Yes, participate in it. The bottom line, after several, well, first of all, there was a proposal made by a DFC general manager to move forward with 70% of remaining available drawdown, no more than 1 foot of average subsidence in a county, and using the Hagam model, not the Rundee model. And what that means is that's the middle of the three options, which is around 97,000 acre feet. And then there was a parade of motions by Lone Star's rep to modify that or have an alternative, and they all failed except the last one, which was to not. It was more of a house cleaning administrative thing, and it was the same DFC. Instead of making it a resolution, just making it a statement, and so and that passed. But that's basically what was proposed by the voting members of the GMA 14. What will happen now is there will be that DFC will be released. Once it's published, there will be a 90-day comment period that will be for all 5 groundwater conservation districts, not just Lone Star. And all 5 will have to have a public hearing in their respective areas within that 90 days. And then after the comment period, they will collect all of their comments, each one, and they will decide as a board what changes, if any, they want to make to that proposed DFC. So comment period will last sometime until July. And then they have basically August and September for each one of those boards, including Lone Star, to decide what changes they want to make. And then they will all come back and meet together on October the 6th to try to resolve any questions, comments, concerns they have. And they may adopt the DFC that's proposed, that they may have changes to it that they all agree to. So it's, one more time, it's very important that there be input collectively from the county to Lone Star, not just written comments, but during that public hearing to have people actually show up. And I don't know at that time if it's going to be a virtual Zoom meeting or if it's going to be an in-person meeting, but it's going to be really important that there be a lot of voices heard regarding that DFC, because there will be plenty of voices that will come from the camp of this is too restrictive. So
what concerns me is the 1 foot of average subsidence. And that reminds me of the story of the man who waded across a river and drowned in a river that averaged 6 inches deep. I mean, there are going to be parts of the county that are going to experience a lot more. And we've already seen that in South Montgomery County. So I'm really upset by this use of average of 1 foot subsidence.
yeah, early in the process, it was probably when they first identified the DFCs, there was a conversation among the GCDs of, is it average or is it max? And while they never really voted on it, it ended up being an average. And that's because in most of the counties that is not Harris or Montgomery, the average is not as variant as it is in Montgomery County. The challenge that we're going to have moving forward is that the only thing they've modeled, the 3 options that they modeled, that the DFCs modeled, were with 1 foot of average. And so if there was a movement to say, well, I want a numerical max, that has not been modeled. And so they would have to go through that process and model that. And I'm not sure if that would gain a lot of ground with the other GCDs, but it's a very valid point. The other point I like to make is when you listen to the verbiage. I know yesterday we had a representative of Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District speak at our GRP review committee meeting. And they stated that the DFC was 70% withdrawal in 2080 and subsidence of an average of 1 foot in over 70 years. And so they keep on hammering on, that's a condition that we're only worried about 70 years from now. And I would be concerned, I am concerned, that they're only looking at that as an endpoint 60 or 70 years from now and not using it as a metric to compare, on an annual or every couple of year basis. And so if you're only worried about something 70 years from now, then what happens in that 70-year period? And can it drop outside of that metric for some period of time? And that would be a concern I have.
And another concern too is that whatever subsidence we experience is irreversible.
Yes.
Right. Further, the models only make estimates.
Yes. And so, as you know, the model for Montgomery County for this particular scenario that's been proposed is about 1.5 feet in the woodlands. Well, if you're only worried about what it is and you're only going to focus on 2080, as you said, even though it's irreversible, if you're bebopping along and you get to 1.4 feet and you do it over a much shorter period of time, then you go, well, we need to change. You can't just shut off all your wells and build more extensive pipelines in the region to supply surface water to stop it that quickly. So that would be another concern. So those are some concerns that we have about what's been stated, but we do support it, and I think y'all do too. And we've had some conversations with USGS, the subsidence district, about getting some more extensometers in the area to actually measure subsidence from pumping in the Jasper.
I'm not an expert in the field, but if we were to withdraw water from the ground no more than what is sustainable. In other words, the withdrawal equals the recharge rate. Would that terminate subsidence? Would that cause subsidence? Or is there a lag effect from the years past where we've drawn down so much?
There's some lag effect, but I'll point back to the data that Matt presented, last year, that we've been presenting on an annual basis of our aquifer level drops, and comparing to that PAM site 13 that's in the Woodlands. When we were sitting at back in 2016 and 2017 and using about 65% surface water, which was about countywide equal to about the 64,000 number that they had that the previous board had declared as sustainable. You recall the subsidence rate at PAM site 13, that rate dropped dramatically and flattened out. So you could argue that the sustainable rate is somewhere in the 60,000 acre feet range. You're always going to have some subsidence, but the rate would be flattened out greatly.
Yeah, like a lot of homes here in Grogan's Point, just flooded by inches, a matter of inches in Harvey, and adding another foot to that would affect a lot of homes, including my own home. We just missed flooding by a foot. So another foot here would put us underwater along with all of our neighbors.
Right.
And it's important to understand that it's not a one-to-one correlation. You have 1 inch of subsidence, you have 1 more inch of water in the house, because the subsidence occurs, at 1,000 plus feet, well below the riverbed. What it really affects is the slope of the channel, the river channel, which impacts flooding, absolutely. But I think the flood control district is doing a study along Spring Creek that I think will help understand the relationship between subsidence and increased flooding. But it's not a one-to-one relationship where you have 1 inch of subsidence in an area, you get 1 inch more water in a home.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jim. Also, in that the subsidence district is tagging on with that study, and it's gonna be a really interesting study. It's supposed to be out next year, where they're looking at flooding in Spring Creek, but they're also looking at potential what pumpage will do to subsidence, and then how that subsidence then affects the drainage patterns, which then impacts the flooding area. And that study will be a very, very key study coming out next year on what those direct correlations are. Yeah, excellent point. Jim.
And perhaps it's premature to adopt a DFC now that's almost 50% higher than what we now have.
Yeah, you make another excellent point. Is you've got that Spring Creek study that's coming out next year. You also have the new Gulf 2023 groundwater model that's going to be coming out actually in late 22. And so one of the arguments could be, why change everything now? Because you don't know what the results are going to be. Once you get those results, you can feed those results into the next cycle of the DFC and change accordingly. Because it's, as y'all all know, it's always harder to go from less restrictive to more restrictive than it is from more restrictive to less restrictive. And so if you open up the, as my grandfather used to say, you open up the barn and the cows or the horses get out, it's kind of late to go find the horses again.
Yes. It's a lot easier to let them out than to try to collect them and bring them back.
Right.
Question. When's the next board election for Lone Star?
No, great question. November 2022. And even more important, of the 7 members that are sitting on that board, 4 seats are open, including the Woodlands seat, specifically the Woodlands seat, and for the precinct that the majority of the Woodlands. So there are 4 open seats, and so there is an opportunity there too.
Who will make the choice of the candidates? Individuals. You don't want it to be just walk up. You want somebody to put a little thought to who should run and when.
That's another great point. That needs to be a careful consideration of who it is. Are they willing to do it, and then starting as early as they can, right? So.
All right.
Well, there are a number of us who feel very, very strongly against the GMA's decision of the 97,000 acre feet. And of course, Lone Star was pushing for 117,000 acre.
Right. I will give credit to those groundwater conservation district general managers of the other 4. They stood up and said, we're not willing to go to 115 or to that level. And it took a lot for them to do that. And so, I think they're very receptive to other options that may be different than what they selected as initial proposed.
So the question is, do we continue to fight for the present DFC, or should we just toss in the towel?
Well, oh no, I'm never a fan of tossing in the towel, even after the fight is done. Just an opinion is that I think if there was a collective, singular voice coming from collectively Southern Montgomery County, as for sure, and I've read your resolution that you're in favor of something strict, more restrictive than what they chose. I think that would be they would listen to that. The GMA 14 members would listen to that, and because it's that pendulum, right? You know that there's going to be some that are going to fight real hard for the one at 115,000. And so if you feel that the sustainable level, which probably is on the lower end, or the one option at 80% remaining available drawdown and even less subsidence, I think that's what should be promoted and stated to Lone Star and the GMA 14. But I also feel there needs to be kind of a unified voice. I mean, if one group in the Woodlands says, I want this, and another group says, well, I really want this, another group in Southern Montgomery County says this, and those are conflicting, then that's going to be harder to reconcile at the board level, Lone Star board level. But if there is a more unified voice, I think it would help tremendously, and I think it would be heard. It may not be heard at the Lone Star board level, but it would be heard at the GMA 14 level.
The Township Future Group, which I'm a member of, submitted a statement that was signed by 300 people. We had 300 names. Currently, we have over 500 names have been added to that list, and I think this group is going to try to grow that list, and I sure wouldn't mind seeing a couple thousand names on it. Maybe that's wishful thinking.
That is a great effort, and what they need is also some of those people to represent that group at the Lone Star public hearing.
Well, that brings up the next item on here, item 13. is I got contacted by George Newman. I forget what mud he's in. I think it's 46. Preparing a resolution regarding the DFCs. And I worked with him to put together a draft of a resolution that's contained on pages 23 and 24 of your packet. Does anybody have any comments on that? If there are no comments, I would like to make a motion that MUD 1 prepare and submit a resolution regarding DFCs per what is attached in pages 23 and 24. I may want to edit a little more. We're not going to submit this right away. We got several months to do so, but I would like to make the motion that MUD 1 prepare a resolution regarding DFCs.
And can I'm sorry, Bob, I've been on the phone in and out of the meeting trying to deal with something. I would just like to make this observation, and I think I sent an email. I think this topic is important enough that it would be helpful to send a united message, not just a resolution by your MUD and maybe one or two more, but by all of the MUDs in a united and consistent message. The township, the One Water Task Force. I even had a discussion with Dan Coker's the other day. I think the Howard Hughes Corporation has some interest in this topic. If they were willing to be a part of this united message, I think that would be very helpful. And I guess my overall comment would be, if we act on something now with your MUD, and the message that the unified message that comes out is something different, that can complicate things. I certainly think it's appropriate to share the draft message and resolution that you and Neil and George Newman and others put together. But I think there's time, and Ron can help me with this, that to try to get a larger unified message together and maybe look at it next month. You know, I hate to delay important things like this, but the more people that we could get to accept a single message, I think the better off we'd be. Ron, can you offer your observations?
Yes, sir. I would agree that if we could get a unified message amongst many different entities, that's going to go a long way. And I think the resolution is a good one. It states your purpose. I think what the GMA and probably Lone Star is going to want to see is a little bit more definition of sustainable and what you mean by that. And you may even want to go as far as suggesting, you know, which of the three options you would prefer that they choose.
Well, I would certainly like to be a part of working with the various groups on doing this. I withdraw my motion, and Ron and Jim, I'd certainly like to work with you. And when we have a meeting of the One Water Task Force, which I believe is next week.
Next Tuesday.
I will bring that subject up.
Perfect.
That we can get the development company, the township, SJRA, Woodlands Water, whatever group of people we can get together to submit a single statement. I'm all for that. I'm all for that.
The single statement could be multiple resolutions for multiple bodies. It's just that it's a common message.
Well, I will do what I can working with you guys to see that we do this, and I'll push it at the Woodlands Water.
And just to play off the comment that was made earlier, you know, it's a lot easier to let a few horses out of the barn and control it rather than open it and try to bring them back in. You know, our message may be, we have evidence that the 64,000 acre feet provided a very stable aquifer level and subsidence metric. And maybe we need to go back to that and look at easing it up over time rather than picking something much bigger and then trying to dial it back.
Right.
Agreed. Okay, so we take no action at this point on item 13. So let's move on to item 14, upcoming MCAD Board of Directors.
The Montgomery Central Appraisal District has requested if any special purpose districts wish to put forth a candidate for the special purpose district position on the MCAD board. You may recall, I think the last cycle, I think it was Arthur Bredehoff was a candidate and maybe some other district, but the township had enough votes to carry that position, and Peggy Hausman was seated as a special purpose district candidate. We haven't had any, we mentioned this last month at the MUD meetings, and I didn't receive any interest from any of our MUD directors, but I did receive interest from Arthur Bredehoff, interested in running for being a candidate, special purpose district candidate. Actually, the Metro Center MUD district last night voted to put his name forward. So unless you have another candidate that you would like to put forward as a special purpose district candidate, Arthur is offered and agreed to represent the Woodlands MUDs in that position.
Well, I think many of us know Arthur, and I, for one, know him and think very, very highly of him, and I can't think of a better candidate at this time. So I would certainly endorse him. Anybody else have some comments?
Bob, this is Jeff. I concur with that. I think that's probably a good choice. He has a broad range of experiences within the Woodlands, and I think he would be an excellent candidate.
And you may recall he actually filled a vacant spot. He was appointed to fill a vacant spot on the board, not a special purpose district spot, but another spot. So he's got experience sitting on that board in the past.
Okay, well, I will make a motion to support Arthur Bredehoff as our candidate on the MCAD board. Do we?
And at this point, Jeannie or Brian, help me. If he's already been nominated by Metro, is there any need for another MUD to submit that? So it's the ball is rolling. So unless you want to offer up another name, I don't think there's any need for action today on your part.
Jim,
Mrs. Brian, that's correct.
Right. This is for the one district is opening up the election to participate. The next time we'll nominate somebody. So we don't, you know, as far as any other district doing this, Metro has opened up the participation, and we'll wait for the next letter after that to put his name on the ballot, or anybody else that wants to be put on there.
So there's no need to act on anything at this time.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to item 15. Attorney report, Brian.
This is Brian. Good morning, board. Few items to touch on under the attorney's report. One, you should have received an email from Shelley last week with a link to a couple of legislative updates from AWBD. I think those are useful for y'all to kind of get a sense of flavor for what's going on at the Capitol. As I mentioned at the trustee meeting last week, we were initially hopeful or thought that perhaps the session would have a reduced number of bills due to it getting kicked off later than usual with in-person activity at the Capitol due to COVID and the security issues that followed what happened in DC. But they ended up introducing about the same number of bills, believe it or not, as in previous sessions, right around 7,000 bills, which is fairly typical, a little bit lower, maybe a few hundred bills lower, but in that same range. They just did it in a much more compressed time period. So we are in the thick of really a more traditional legislative session at this point. Committee hearings are ongoing. Bills are making their way through the process. So we're very active in that. Got a couple of lobbyists pretty much full-time in Austin right now, monitoring bills and working on bills that we've been engaged by clients to represent them on. We do have a general bill tracker for internal purposes that I had a few directors ask about more bills, and so went ahead and provided that. I think that may be on the Google Drive, but that's a more cumulative list that we're tracking for the industry because we assist AWBD and also for specific district interests that is closer to 900 bills out of the around 7,000 that are introduced. And just to kind of give you a recap on the sense of how many bills generally pass, only about, less than 15% of bills in a session generally pass. I think last session it was maybe around 1,100 or so out of over 7,000 bills, which is fairly typical. So this is really the weeding out process. So I wouldn't get too hung up on individual bills unless when you check them on the Texas legislature online, they've made it out of committee and are getting a vote on the floor and or moving, have a companion, especially if they have a companion on the other side, which I mentioned on a couple of those river authority bills do not have companions, and those bills have not had hearings yet. So I think it's still early for any bills to be declared dead at this point because we still have over a month. We got about 6 weeks left in the session. At this time next month, we'll have a lot better sense of where things are in the session because there'll only be a couple of 2 or 3 weeks left. But right now, even if bills haven't had a hearing, there's still a chance for them to make their way through and get picked up on in the other chamber if there was a real push to do so. But on the river authority bills we talked about, we're not seeing that yet. Could change, but right now there doesn't seem to be a lot of action there, and there's not a companion on the Senate side. A lot of bills of a general nature, don't want to belabor, take up too much time in the meeting, but a lot of bills have been introduced this session, as you would expect, on election laws. We'll have to just see how that shakes out. A lot of nuance and mechanical stuff on how elections are conducted, ID requirements, et cetera, that could impact us. We're monitoring those. Transparency, you probably got the e-blast about Senate Bill 526. There were some concerns in the mud industry about that bill. We were able to work with Senator Colkhurst on a committee substitute for that bill that we think addressed a number of those concerns, and we're pleased with where that bill is at this point. There have been some bills introduced that would allow for remote meeting options in the future. Those don't seem to be getting a lot of traction right now that would allow for either some meetings to be conducted remote if directors were not, or elected officials were not able to attend in person, or would allow for members of the public to participate remotely. It's still a little early to say how that shakes out, but there have been some bills introduced on that, but they don't seem to be moving a lot right now. Of course, could change. A lot of bills introduced on property tax. different issues related to property tax. I've seen bills introduced that would reduce the 10% cap on homestead limitations down to 5%. I've seen one that was like 2.5 or 3.5%. I've seen some bills introduced that would freeze your value at the time that you purchase the property, and it would be frozen for as long as you own the property. So there's a lot of bills introduced right now that are trying to address appraisal creep, and we'll have to be aware of that, similar to how we were with Senate Bill 2 in the last session that limited the increase in maintenance tax that the district could obtain. Well, this session, they're going after not just tax revenue increases, but they're going after appraisal increases. Also, I've seen some bills introduced that would modify how the appraisal review board or the board of directors of an appraisal district are selected. I've seen some that would require for the board of directors to be elected by voters on a county precinct basis, and then an at-large position. A different bill that would, instead of the board of directors being elected by voters, that the appraisal review board, what you're nominating a special purpose district representative for now, instead of it being elected by the taxing jurisdictions, that those appraisal review board members would be elected by the by voters. So a lot of stuff going on with property taxes and appraisal district matters. So we're keeping a close eye on that as well. And those are the I'd say the hottest items that we're seeing right now. But it's just another busy session as usual. So happy to answer any general questions y'all may have on that. And then, of course, the board meetings themselves, haven't heard anything else out of the governor's office. So we remain status quo on our meeting arrangements at this time.
Brian, Will Metcalf submitted House Bill 3801, modifying the Chapter 36 of the Water Code. Are you familiar with that proposed legislation?
Let's see, 3801. Yes. Let me pull up where that is right now.
And it's has to do with the development of DFCs. And it's to be developed using the district's best available data forwarded to the region's water planning group.
Mm-hmm. And that bill, it looks like, did make it through the House yesterday.
I'm not sure how to interpret the legal language of that.
You know, I've asked a few questions about that one. I'm not going to tell you. I'm in the weeds on an administrative from an administrative law perspective on.
But my impression is that it strengthens the Lone Star Groundwater District's proposal.
You know, I don't know. It didn't look overly problematic. I'd be interested to hear Ron's take on the language of the bill as well. Just at a cursory review, it didn't look overly problematic.
Well, I would certainly welcome your spending a little more time trying to interpret on what it really means. I can't figure it out.
Which bill number is that?
3801, submitted by Larson and Metcalf.
Well, actually, that was a bill that was initiated by the Texas Water Conservation Association which is, all the river authorities and other water authorities in Texas, to help clarify. Basically what that bill is trying to do is clarify when a DFC is considered unreasonable, then where do you go from there? Remember the problem that Lone Star had the other year is that their current DFC was considered unreasonable. And so the question was, did they have to go back to the 2016 or did they go back to the 2010 version? And so this language actually clarifies that. So this bill, 3801, is actually supported by TWCA, and we were a part of that, trying to negotiate the wording needed for that. It should help going down the future.
So it should help us, is what you're saying.
It should help. It should help.
Well, that's good news.
It will help other groundwater districts should they get caught in the same position Lone Star was in.
Well, and going forward.
That's not what I meant going forward, yeah.
Going forward, if we get DFCs that are adopted by GMA 14 and
good point.
Somebody pursues that and says those are unreasonable, then what DFC do you go back to? So
yeah. Understood.
And it's very unclear in chapter 36, and this is an attempt to clear it up.
So Brian, when will that vote take place on that bill?
This is Brian. So it's already been voted on in the House yesterday. It looks like it passed the House yesterday. And so now it's going over to the Senate. There is a companion bill on this legislation in the Senate Bill 2157 by Creighton. So that bill by Creighton looked like it had not made it through it was referred to committee. So what's likely going to happen now is that Creighton will likely pick up the House bill because it's already passed the House, and we'll start moving it through the House, through the Senate. I'm sorry.
Okay. Anything more on the attorney's report? Anybody have any further questions? And Brian, you want to talk about policy number Con 10?
This is Brian. Happy to. So this is the action item that we talked about last month when it was just a discussion item to update the form of Con 10. We had been asked by a couple of boards to dust that off because they still had a few developer projects to complete in their districts. I don't think we have any in Mud 1, but since it is a consolidated policy, all the districts have to consider a revision to the policy. Primary revisions that were incorporated into this updated form were to include more statutory references instead of regurgitating the language from those statutes in the body of the policy. I've found over the years that it's better to include more references to make documents evergreen in case the legislature were to modify those operative statutes. Because if you just embed the actual statutory language in your document and that changes, then all of a sudden your document's no longer up to date. So wanted to change that structural issue, but that's the main thrust of it. No other material changes to the policy. I think we did modify the term of the agreement. Talked about that last month to make that standard with what we have in the industry today for these developer agreements. And that's pretty much it, but happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, this is Director McIntosh. I think it's nice to have a updated policy, but it didn't address the issue that we were asking to be addressed, and that's when they an area gets changed in designation, and I'll use the Spree Academy as an example. We weren't notified when they changed that designation of that area. And I've talked to Walter about this because he was on the DSC and he understands this. And I'm sorry he's not here today. But then when they go from a single story, it was initially approved as a church, and then it became a daycare center with a few students, a few people on one story, and then all of a sudden we've got a 3-story K through 12 school. And of course, this changes our standard family equivalent usage factor, and nobody's paid for that. Okay, we have to pay for that. And what we wanted to do is be sure that the MUDs were included on anything that is going to affect the standard family equivalent usage unit, and that it be paid for, because we don't have any bonds left to let, and we're going to have to get that from somewhere. And by the way, even if tax exempt entities, we are allowed by law, as I understand it, to charge them for their pro rata share of the infrastructure. And when they built the Lutheran Church on Lake Woodlands Drive, a former president of the Joint Powers Agency was a big gunner in that church. And we brought to his attention that that church owed us, if we wanted to exercise, about $250,000 for infrastructure on that property. And we put it in the minutes and forgave it because it had not been utilized anywhere else, and it was basically a new law and never before utilized in the Woodlands. But I think our content has to address these changes, not just update the language of the current content, which, by the way, nobody had a problem with the current content, except that we don't ever have a representative coming to us from the developer anymore. And of course, during development phase, Olaf Askerson came every MUD meeting and then replaced by Richard Deere. And we had a requirement that we be given a status of all undeveloped properties in which we had approved content. And I guess when we combined and became MUD 1, we've never got that report again. And I don't know what happened to it, but the reason we needed that report at the time was that they had introduced more estate lots in the Woodlands, and we had a number of them laying vacant. And so that's when we had about 250 lots in MUD 40 when we started that process. Anyway, I have no objection to approving the revision of the content, but I've talked also to our general manager and said, just updating the one that does not address the reason we wanted to revise content doesn't do anything for us. You know, it's just painting over the fence. It's still rotting out, okay, with the termites. And I think we should applaud the changes to the content, but I'm not in favor of approving it when it doesn't meet the goal of what we asked for. to ensure that the MUDs are included when there's a change in the designation of an area that they've already approved, and nobody comes back to them and says, well, we're going to change this. And by the way, the developer used to do this. And the example is, if you know where across from Panther Creek Village Shopping Center, we have the area that Dr. Lewis is currently in. That was initially a Scott Mitchell project of places that firms would buy their own townhouse. And we have some of those in the Woodlands now. And then they changed it to what it currently is. And they came back to us and said, look, we're going to change this. And this is a different kind of a development. And the tax base on it is different. And the usage of standard family equivalence is different. Now, that's a long speech to say, I don't object to the revisions that are made to the Con 10, but the Con 10 that we asked for to be revised has not been done. And I personally am going to vote against approving it. And I asked our general manager to appoint a committee to review this and have people like Walter Lazuski, who understands what the DSC does in approving these things and changing the land usage on us without even letting us know. And the developer doesn't let us know anymore either. Okay, so there we are.
This is Brian. So appreciate the comments, Hartley. You kind of covered several things in that. So let me try to parse them out one by one. Start with and we do have a representative from Howard Hughes on the line that I'm sure can speak to whatever development is remaining in MUD 1. I don't know that we have much, if any, in this particular district, but Dan can speak to that. But before we get to that, just at a overview level, the purpose of the Con 10 is just to set out the terms upon which a developer will be reimbursed for pre-financing new infrastructure. It does not address issues and is not intended to address, and doesn't make sense to address issues of redevelopment years down the road that may not even involve the developer that was reimbursed with for the new water or wastewater infrastructure. For instance, you can have a strip center or a mall or community building, or like the building you talked about, the developer could be out of the chain of title and is going and being redeveloped for some other use. The Con 10 would serve no purpose. There's no chain of title there that would have an obligation by that next party to be involved. I think more what you're talking about is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is the redevelopment, because we're not involved in zoning, so we don't say you can do this, but you can't do that. Our lane as a MUD is in capacity and infrastructure. So if there's a redevelopment that changes the usage requirements, so from like, make it up numbers, from 2 EFCs to 10, that 8 delta, how is that going to be addressed? The vehicle to address something like that is not a reimbursement agreement for new infrastructure for a new development, but would be through either an agreement that either the district doesn't have the capacity. The first question is, do you have capacity or do you not have excess capacity? If you don't, then that new purchaser is going to have to come to you and say, I'm in the district, I want to redevelop, I need 8 additional units. So we've had this come up actually in some other districts. And that developer has had to enter into a separate agreement. It's not a Con 10, but a separate agreement to where they pay for that capacity that's short. And the district then uses those funds to go and buy that capacity. So that's really a one-off deal that is a separate standalone agreement if a change in use results in a need for capacity that the district is unable to meet with its current capacity. So that's not really a Con 10 issue. It's a separate agreement issue. The second thing, talking about schools, you were exactly right, Hartley, that there is legally the ability to charge what's called a tax-exempt tap fee. That some MUD, the Woodlands historically has not ever charged a tax-exempt tap fee for schools or for other non-taxable entities, whether it be churches or whatever it may be. But legally, it is possible. I do have other districts that do that. There are a few nuances in how that tax-exempt tap fee is calculated. Some of them will just charge what their actual hard costs were for the construction of the infrastructure that is already existing that's necessary to serve that tax-exempt property. Some of them will roll in some bond issuance costs. It just depends on the district. But that number can get fairly burdensome for some entities, and sometimes it can deter tax exempt or religious or hospitals or schools or whatever from being in that particular district and going to another district. And I think maybe, I'm not sure what all the rationale was originally for the Woodlands not doing that. Part of it may have been to encourage schools to be built here and churches and things when it was first getting going, and not to deter them with additional expenses that would maybe make them go somewhere else or not come here and help the Woodlands to grow. But that's a policy decision that's been made in the Woodlands over the last 40 years. Not to say it can't change, but if it did change, that would be addressed in a policy for tap fees. And we would have to detail out what would be included in that tax exempt tap fee. So we can, if that's something that the board wants to talk about, we can certainly put that on the agenda as a separate discussion item. And then last, I think, is the issue about the developer and the development. And I can go ahead and hand it over to Dan to talk about, if he knows offhand, what undeveloped property there is remaining in MUD 1 and kind of what their plans are for that property.
Well, this is Director McIntosh. The plans are the ones we approved. Okay, we approved the plans, and the developer was supposed to develop so we would have a tax base to pay for the bonds, and the developer was not at one time developing our estate lots, and they were introducing more estate lots in the Woodlands. At one time, the only estate lots in the Woodlands were Wilding Estates. And then in 1981, they had some estate lots that were in MUD 40 along West Wedgewood Glen and that area and Split Rock. And they were leaving them undeveloped and also the ones on the lake as well. So we got that straightened out anyway. But I think that when you have an agreement, the developer is going to do something, the DSC just can't automatically change what you have approved in the usage of that land without coming to the MUD. And I don't care who owns the land. We have already approved the use of that land at the MUD level, and the DSC has acted independently to change that usage without even letting us know. And that's got to be addressed in some policy.
Hey, Bob, this is Jeff Long. Before you go on here, I've got to head out, and I know you still have a quorum. Unfortunately, I'm working full time, and the director got a stroke and there's no one down watching the shop. So I'm going to have to be out of here so I can be there at 10. So I'm going to leave this discussion in about 3 minutes.
And Hartley, I would agree with you that I think there does need to be coordination between us and the for redeveloping property. And I'm happy to meet with, well, I guess now would be Arthur Bredehoff to talk about how that communication could be opened when a property is being redeveloped and the capacity is going to be either increased or decreased, and how that might impact the MUD's purchase capacity. I think that's something that does need to be vetted. I think it's independent of the content agreement, but I do agree that it needs to be discussed and worked out, and I'm happy to take that ball and run with it.
Yeah, this is Brian. I think maybe what we could talk to Walt and Arthur about is maybe adding that to a DSC checklist of, you know, is there a change in capacity necessary for this redevelopment, proposed redevelopment? And if so, has the MUD approved or has the property owner made arrangements to acquire that additional capacity? That's what gives us the hook to be involved in the land use change.
And we ask it to be included in content.
This is Brian, and the content, as I mentioned, is just not the vehicle for that, because that's
that is your interpretation of the reason for content. Okay, I'm saying it should be amended to see that we're informed, and that there's precedent for that because it's been done before.
If we go ahead and approve the present revision to content, we can still modify it again in the future. I mean, my feeling is to approve what we have and then proceed further to see what needs to be done either in content or outside of content to address the concerns that you bring up, Hartley.
And I think Brian would say this is certainly a uniform template, but in the event a content agreement is needed with any MUD, they have the right to tweak it as what would be appropriate for that MUD. Brian, is that correct?
Yeah, this is Brian, and Hartley, just to kind of flesh that out a little bit for you, I'm not. I think what you're going at is a good issue to tackle. I guess part of the thought is in a content that's for a new development of property, and where you are in MUD 1, most of the issues that are going to come up are going to be with redevelopment, and all those contents are long gone because all that infrastructure has already been built. So you really need a different mechanism than an agreement for new development, because you may not even have another one in this district. Maybe you will, but I think there's not a whole lot left for new development. It's going to be redevelopment. So you need a hook to be able to be involved in the process of redevelopment of stuff that's already in your district. And that, a agreement for reimbursing a developer for new infrastructure is not going to be your best vehicle to get to the table for that discussion. And so I think, getting involved with the DSC process for all this property that's already been developed, as Jim mentioned, is really MUD 1's best opportunity to get to the table on that issue, which is an important one as the woodlands gets older and we do have some redevelopment.
I will clean up. Okay, I got to clean up the mess here at lunch when I get back. Okay.
Do we have?
So we'll certainly keep working on this issue.
Bob, do y'all want the developer's take on that just briefly? I promise to be quick.
Say that again, Dan.
Just I was going to give you the developer's take on that. First off, Hartley, your points are exceptionally correct. There's a lot of issues that have to happen when property is developed or redeveloped. I've taken a look at the MUD 1 map. we currently don't have any land left that I'm aware of to develop in your area. Most of the areas that are going to be redeveloped already have infrastructure in place. So if there would be a need for, there may not be a need for a content because there's not going to be redeveloped any new facilities constructed that are going to propose to be reimbursed. But that being said, the DSC changing the land use is an issue that needs to be addressed. Certainly, there needs to be some coordination between the two. But in the end, any developer that starts any construction activity anywhere has to come to the MUD and get water and sewer capacity service letters from you guys. If they want to add 20 connections, they still have to come to you to get that permission, and you have the.
They don't though. They didn't. We never knew about a Spree Academy. We never knew about it.
Yeah,
the developer doesn't come to the MUD. That's why we want a policy that requires them to do that.
Right. I'm unfamiliar with that case. I don't think that was a property that we developed. I hope you help. I'll stand by that.
Well, according to Walter, they changed the designation of that property twice. We never knew about it.
This is Mike. I went back just to when we started projecting build-outs for SFD, and I looked at that Esprit tract, and we have carried that since the last interim accounting as a school/church property. Well, the school and church properties, the SFDUE planning criteria is calculated by the acreage. So we always had capacity for that tract. Now,
yeah, well, it was a church, and now it's a school.
Yes, same planning
and
criteria.
It is a school that's supposed to have 40 acres, and they have 5. And it's going to be a problem forever, and we didn't have anything to say about it.
Well, planning criteria is the same whether it's 5 acres or 50 acres. It's by the gallons per day per acre.
Perhaps the background noise phone number 5423 with Mr. Mike immediately interfering with the discussion. Well, there's only 3 directors now.
Everybody's breaking up.
I think there's some noise coming from.
You're breaking up.
I can barely hear Bob.
You're breaking up.
Needs to mute.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Hey, Bob, this is Jeff. I'll sign off. It may be mine.
That's much better. Yeah.
That was it.
We only have 3 directors left. And Hartley, are you going to change your position on approving content here? Or
no?
Well, we need to.
Well, we can take a vote on it if somebody wants to make a motion.
Well, I make the motion that we approve it, and that, and I add a comment to the motion that this content can again be modified in the future. But we do have a proposal before us for this modified content in the policy manual, and I would like to go ahead and see that it's approved, and then in the future make additional changes as warranted. So my motion is to approve policy number content. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Ken Darling.
Any further comment? So Brian, there's only 3 of us. You can go ahead and poll the 3 of us.
Okay, this is Brian. If there's no further discussion, we will call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Hartley?
No.
Motion fails.
Motion fails.
No, motion passed. 2 yeses, 1 no.
This is Brian. You have to have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
This is Brian. That's correct, but we need a quorum of the board, the full board membership to pass.
The quorum of the board is 3.
Correct, and the quorum of the board for passing a vote is still 3. So 2 to 1 is a fail.
All right.
Jim, do we have time, or Brian, to revisit this and come back again next month?
Yes, sir.
This is Brian. We can keep it on the agenda for when we have a full board present. Yes.
Okay, well, that doesn't address the question of Brian, if you will talk to Hartley and figure out how we can address his concerns and where they should be addressed, I think that will resolve the problem next month.
This is Brian. Okay, I'll work with Jim and Hartley on that.
Okay. Okay, let's move on to item 17, Spring Creek Watershed Dam and Engineering.
This is the interlocal agreement that's been prepared with all of the parties that will be participating in this additional study of the detention and dams along Spring Creek that was started a couple of years ago. I think at this point we have our 4 MUDs, MUD 1, MUD 46, MUD 60, and MUD 7. Also, MUD 386 is participating. The city of Humble is participating, and the Harris County Flood Control District is participating. So we're presenting it to you today for your approval to keep this effort going.
Was that in the packet, Jim, the agreement, the draft of it?
I think it was too many pages to be in the packet. Shelley, where?
It was an insert with the packet, yes.
Okay, I guess I missed it. But, you know, I'm certainly excited about going forward with this. It's unfortunate, Jim, the township didn't put in $1.25 toward this. Has anybody talked to the township about participating?
Not that I know
of. Maybe I'll bring that up at the One Water meeting next week. And I'm assuming it's never too late to accept money from another party.
I think we could, money could be accepted. Right now it would be from the San Jacinto River Authority. They're who this agreement is with. We're funding it to help their efforts with getting a consultant on board.
Okay, I will make the motion that we approve the interlocal agreement regarding Spring Creek Watershed Flood Control Dams Conceptual Engineering Feasibility Study. Do we have a second?
A second.
Any further?
Director McIntosh seconds.
Any further discussion?
I have a question. I agree that this project is quite laudable, but I've never seen anybody approve a project that has a negative cost benefit. We got more costs than we have benefits here. Don't we need to scrounge up a few more benefits somewhere down the line that we can put in here?
Well, I was, forget who I was talking to about it, may have been Alan Black. He said that there are many, many soft benefits that don't go into the economic cost benefit analysis. And I think that's why the Texas Water Development Board approved SJRA's request for more money to fund this study. It's because of the soft benefits and not just the dollar benefits alone. Jim, you have any comment on that?
I think this is one component of several improvements that can be made along Spring Creek to improve flooding and drainage in the areas of the woodlands. And to achieve the greatest benefit, as I remember, it was a combination of doing some detention, some channel improvements, both. And I think when you combine both of those, you exceed the cost benefit ratio. So this is one component, and it in itself may be less than one, but when the others were put together and the community benefit, I think it did exceed one, is what my recollection is. If you recall, there were many, many projects throughout the San Jacinto Rivershed that were studied, and 16 were actually put forward as viable projects that were recommended to go forward. 4 of those were along Spring Creek that would help the woodlands, and this is one of those.
And this is still a feasibility study. It doesn't mean we're spending money to actually.
Yeah, I understand.
So did we have Hartley seconded? So without further discussion, Brian, you want to call the vote?
This is Brian. Yes, if there's no further discussion, we'll call the vote on the interlocal. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, let's move on to item 18, the consolidation study. The committee has done nothing this past month, partially due to concerns related to Uri, the freeze we had, and also the work that all of us have been doing on the DFC issue. So there's nothing to report, but I will get together with Maureen very, very soon. And she's been pretty busy along with Jim fighting the TACUS group. So it's a combination of things why nothing was done. So Jim, are things getting under control?
You know, I hope, right now I can say things are much better. So I'm hopeful in the next couple of weeks that we can get this back on a higher priority.
Great. Okay, general manager's report.
A few things to highlight from our trustee meeting. We did finally have a vote on looking at the feasibility of consolidating wastewater treatment in the woodlands, and that topic and the authorizing the San Jacinto River Authority to put out their request for qualifications and score consultants and bring it back to the trustees passed unanimously. We did report that the San Jacinto Regional Flood Planning Group has voted to add another voting member, an upper San Jacinto watershed voting member. Neil Gaynor has expressed an interest in that. You may recall a couple of months ago, all 10 of our MUDs unanimously supported Neil for any new voting membership position. So I'll be preparing a letter of recommendation on behalf of our 10 MUDs to that group recommending Neil. The TACUS struggle is ongoing. We had some pretty good productive meetings with their staff and their attorney and our attorney. We're working at tweaking some construction methods, some notification protocol, still having discussions about reimbursement for the expenses, the damage. I've got a meeting set up with their chief financial officer tomorrow morning to continue those discussions. But things have gotten a little better, I think, in that arena, and we'll continue to work to try to make things better. I did, we report that the inspection of the Bear Branch Reservoir Dam, recent inspection reveals some voids underneath some concrete slope paving that the San Jacinto River Authority Lake Conroe Division is exploring those to try to get a handle on how extensive the voids are. We hope to get some better information on that topic in the next month or so to see what the path forward will be to correcting those. I did report I'm still working with several homeowners in two areas regarding the AMI poles that were constructed and their concern about the view and the sight of those poles from their backyard. I did get feedback from the township that they would be interested in having those poles in parks that are close to these two locations. So I'm looking at that as an option. I hope to bring back some cost estimates to the trustees and the MUDs in the next month or so to look at what options may be available to address those concerns. May 3rd, we've got a meeting planned with our audit committee and President Hurd to go over a number of topics that are covered in the WJPA trustee summary. So that's going to be a very important meeting, looking at the 50-50 topic of groundwater, surface water, looking at the 10-year project plan and the potential financing options for that, looking at the GRP budget, looking at the Woodlands Division, SGRA, wholesale, water and wastewater budget and rates. So a lot of items to be covered on May the 3rd. And the HARC update, monthly update is in your packet if you've got questions on that information. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jim. Does anybody have any questions? More additional comments? If not, let's move on to number 20. Consider and act on the Association of Water Board Directors District Voting Member Representative. Jim, do we have anybody who wants to do this?
You know, I haven't received any feedback from any of the MUD boards. This rollout on this from AWBD was kind of awkward. You know, it appears they're, rather than wanting votes from all 5 of the directors, they are wanting you to select one person to be, at least to give the votes for the upcoming amendments vote, and maybe the board of directors at the June meeting. Brian, you have anything? You've got a lot of MUD districts other than us. What are they doing?
Yeah, this is Brian. It's a mixed bag. It has been kind of a disjointed rollout. I mean, most of my meetings, it was getting brought up out of the blue by bookkeepers of all people. You know, it's up to the board if you want to if you want to participate in this vote. I think there are higher voting participation threshold requirements for AWBD to amend their bylaws. So they're trying to get as much participation as possible, since everyone won't necessarily be attending the summer conference in person. There's a remote option. So they're trying to get districts to delegate one voting member to be able to participate in this bylaws amendment vote remotely. Districts that are really active in AWBD have been designating usually the presiding officer, so the board president, to be able to vote on it. But you know, I've got some MUDs that aren't active in AWBD and aren't really that interested in the vote on the bylaws and don't take any action. So it's up to y'all. I know the Woodlands MUDs are more active than some others in AWBD. So if y'all have an interest in participating in it, you know, Bob, I don't know if you're interested in casting the vote on that, or if there's another, we only have 3 directors here now, but if there's another director that would be interested in voting on the bylaw change, and then there's going to be a trustee vote in June. The bylaw vote, I think, is May 13th or so, if I'm not mistaken. And they've got a copy, we may have a copy of the bylaw, a proposed amendment that may be on the Google Drive. I think Shelley may have it up there. I know it's on AWBD's website.
Well, unless anybody's passionate about this on the board, we'll move on to item 21. Anybody want to act on 20? If not, we'll move on to 21.
And you know what, I failed to mention under my report that we have Ed Shackelford today with the San Jacinto River Authority, a new hire. And Ron had announced his retirement, gosh, a while back, and October is that date. And Ed has been brought on board to help pick up some of the workload that Ron carried. And Ed may have an idea about AWBD. I know you've had a lot of involvement with that group. Do you know anything about this?
Jim, unfortunately, I've missed the last 3 or 4 program committee meetings, so I'm way out of the loop.
Well, and I know I've known Ed for a long time, and he is generally at all the AWBD conferences when they were in person, along with the Water Conservation Association conferences. So, Ron, you have any comments regarding how happy y'all are to have Ed on board? I know we are.
Woo, yeah. And yeah, I've known Ed for a long time, and I think he'll add a lot to for y'all, providing service to our customers.
And I'd like to say it was a privilege to meet you, Ed, at the SCADA meeting, the SCADA tour that we had several weeks ago.
Enjoyed our visit.
But you also have big shoes to fill, because I think very highly of Ron and the work that he's been doing. But from all that I've heard, you can fill them. So we're looking forward to that.
Well, I'm excited at the opportunity, and I don't know if I'll be ever able to be fully competent as Ron, but I'm going to give it a try.
Well, I have his phone number if you ever need it. So. Okay, Hartley, do you want to say anything on the trustees report?
I think that the general manager did a good job of reviewing my trustees report, the pages 38 to 41. Are there any questions? There being none, that's my report.
Thanks, Hartley. Okay, we move on to item 22. Anything on the agenda that anyone wants to add at this time?
Is there any way to nudge forward this 2021-35 Falling Star Court problem? This is coming up a year now. It's been on our agenda, and we've all been, participating and trying to get something done, but it seems to be all tied up among the petitioners. And so can we give them a note that let's get off, let's fish or cut bait?
This is Mike. Yeah, Ken, I will definitely reach out to them and say, we got to do something, or we're gonna have a change of heart.
Yeah,
I'll see what I can do. I'll see what I can do.
Yeah. My impression is this is not very high on their a list of items to do, and I'm getting a little impatient, as is Ken on that. So, well, Shelley, next month I would like to put on the agenda Lone Star's DFCs, and progress that we're making relative to taking a position on this, a unified position. And again, put the consolidation study. Hopefully we'll have something ready to go next month. So they're the only two things I can think of. Anybody else? If not, we reach my favorite item. That's item number 23, adjournment. I declare that the meeting is adjourned. Thanks, everyone. It's been a long meeting. See you all next month.